Today is the new year. Did you know that? In the church world today, this is Advent 1 is what it's called. This is the season of Advent, a season of expectation, a season of longing. Spanish is angelo. This is our up and down roller coaster ride towards the birth of the Christ child. This child who has come to save us. I always love thinking about a baby saving us. How rarely that works in relationships, but it's an interesting idea. Today, our theme for this season is called The Inn, Housing the Holy, which I felt like fit really well for us as a congregation and as a people, because housing people has been something that we have been about for a long time. This week, I imagine we will house some of our houseless guests with the warming center. The warming centers have been open for the last few nights. This weekend, we housed a sacred traditional service for our siblings at New Beginnings. We are collecting things for Family Promise and Courtney Place, which provide housing for veterans and for families seeking to stay off the streets. So housing is important. And today, we're talking about making room. And traditionally, this is called Hope Sunday. This is the Hope Sunday. And I don't know if you know anything about the book of Jeremiah, but it is not the most hopeful book. It's called the Book of Consolation because it is just like hit after hit after hit to the elders of the nation of Israel and Judah, and they are exiled and their temple is lost. Kathleen O'Connor describes it this way: the people are taken captive, dragged from their land, and deprived of their temple. They are beaten, imprisoned, and face death as a people, and like Jeremiah, they cry out to God in anger and despair. I will have you know that there is some fear among churches right now. There was a bill passed in the House of Representatives that said if your nonprofit was labeled as a terror organization, you could lose your nonprofit status. The fear is that those that support Palestine or the Palestinian people will be labeled as terrorist organizations or supporters of terror. I just want that to be in your brain over here. I don't know if that's going to happen. I just know that's the concern. John Calvin talks about Jeremiah in this way: as they were then exposed to slaughter, the children of God saw 1,000 deaths, so that it could not be but that terror almost drove them to despair. And in their exile, they saw that they were far removed from their own country without any hope of return. That does not sound awesome. And one of the theologians who is helping to paint, to put together this theme, Grace Imathio, says that she always looks forward to Advent 1 because of the doom and gloom, which I find interesting. She says, in the darkest moments, the light shines the brightest. And I think about that. I was downstairs in our beloved building, and this is a little quirk about I don't like to turn on lights. I always turn lights off in my house. I have LED lights in my house, so it's not really changing the amount of energy bill that much, but it's sort of like part of me. And I used to take it as a point of pride when I was a camp counselor that I wouldn't use a flashlight. I could walk through the woods without a flashlight and mostly make it. So I was downstairs, going to the way back, and if you've been in our building, you'll know where the way back is. It's down in the worship center. You walk across. It's very easy to see. There's an emergency light, no big deal. But I had to go further in than I had anticipated, and so I turned on my flashlight on my phone, and it was like the sun had come in, right? Super bright. And then I walked back upstairs, and I was in this room with the lights off, and I could barely see the light on my flashlight because there was so much other light. So when the darkness comes, the light shines the brightest. And I wonder about the way Grace Matthew says this. She says that if we are invested in the old story, then it's going to be doom and gloom because the old story's got to go. That's all there is to it. So I wonder about that. What is the old story? We talk about the old story, right, of Jesus. It's a phrase that I've heard my whole life. This old story. But I wonder about whether we, like folks we find in here, refuse to tell the story that is given to us. We think we know better. We change the rules. We look for power and superiority. We look for elbowing people out rather than making room for others. I think this happened. The reason that the people of Israel and Judah were experiencing this calamity was because they weren't following God's laws. This is how it's explained. So as I mentioned to my children today, natural consequence of not following the God who calls us not to have economic disparity, not to imprison people for more than 7 years, not to hoard, but to leave stuff over for the folks to glean the extra. The God of abundance has watched these nations demand a king so that they could rule over. And shockingly, it didn't go well. And the Babylonians and the Assyrians were fighting back and forth, and the Egyptians, and they were caught. This little hamlet on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea was caught in these battles, and it was turmoil. But I will tell you this, Jeremiah is one of my favorite books of the Bible because in Jeremiah it says, "Take yourselves wives, give your sons and daughters to marriage, seek the welfare of the city, and there you will find your own." Now, here's the weird thing. The difference between the old story and the new story. The Israelites and the Judeans were called to be a separate people, to not intermingle, especially with Babylonians. Because the Israelites were righteous and the Babylonians were wicked. Because they did not worship the true God, the one God. But in Jeremiah, the elders are exiled in Babylon, are called to give their children over to marriage, to make a home in Babylon with Babylonians. They are not called to separate, but to integrate. Not assimilate, but integrate. And so they are called to be where they are. And that is a radically different story than the one that they had learned. In fact, in Jeremiah 31, it says, "No God will be written on the hearts of every man," or person, depending on which translation you are reading, "so that fathers will not have to teach it for their sons, or parents to their children. Because the knowledge of God is written on your heart. It is not something that is outside of you that you must gain. It is something that is inside of you that you must become aware of. It is not a conversion or a letting in. It is a opening up of the reality of who you are in the eyes of God. A beloved child, part of the beloved creation." But we are so interested in this conversation about righteousness and wickedness. There's a movie that just came out recently. It's called Wicked. I love it. I cried the whole movie. I don't know if you can see, but I have these socks. These socks I bought in London when I saw Wicked at the West End, which is the weirdest thing I've ever said in my life. The fact that I was at London, the fact that I saw a musical, the fact that it was in the West End is just not who I thought it was going to be at 15. I love the book. Spoiler alert, the book is not the same as the musical. So if you're reading the book and you love the musical, but you're reading the book, it's gonna be different. Hold on. The movie Wicked and the show Wicked starts with a song that says, "No one mourns the wicked. The Wicked Witch of the West is dead. No one mourns the wicked." And then we hear a little bit more of the story of Elphaba and Galinda, her friend, and the wizard, and power, and righteousness. I think in our lives right now, the way that it's taught, not this movie, but the way that we talk about righteousness. Remember, Jeremiah says, "It will be named, the Lord is our righteousness." Every time I really dislike the word righteous, or even thinking about myself as righteous, because it feels like I am separating myself and putting myself above others. You know those self-righteous people who think they're so great? I like when they trip. Schadenfreude, I think that's how you say it, right? Did I say that right? Say it again. Schadenfreude, which is German for "I like watching you fail." Rough translation. But this idea of righteousness goes straight through this season of Advent. And especially in our scriptures, it talks about what it means to be righteous. What it means to, and this is what's fascinating to me, righteousness does not equal superiority. In fact, those that will call themselves righteous are constantly, in this little library of books, thrown down. Most of what Jesus is telling, most of the people that Jesus is railing against are church people. The people who think they got it. I said the prayer, I read the book, I'm good. So this idea of righteousness, justice and righteousness, teach me your paths, O Lord. And I think the path that we have been told is to get as much as we can, as fast as we can, and hold it for as long as we can. But the real story is find as many as you can, be as full as you can, and share everything. Make room, which is hard. When people come into our spaces, our country, they cross borders that we have created. Borders that weren't there 200 years ago, or that are now, they are fleeing from they have been exposed to slaughter. They are fleeing because of the despair that they live in. Now, as it said earlier, we as a church cannot do everything, but we can do something. I love this. The day is surely coming that the Lord will fulfill God's promise. And I think we hear that and we go, oh, good. Phew. God's going to fix it. What if God's fix is you or us? What if hyper-local organizing is the way to save this country from killing itself, from turning it on itself like a cancer and expanding. What if that is what we are called to do? To make room in our life, in our neighborhood, in our community, and let's worry about that. There's many places where exclusion reigns. Let us not be that place. Now, I know that it's hard. And this is not only a physical thing, but this is an emotional thing. I have watched people close themselves off from relationships or think they have it figured out. And it almost always leads to ruin or loneliness or loss. Friends, I know many of you have had trauma where you open yourselves up to somebody and you have been hurt. So take care of yourself. But also be open to the idea that God is at work in you. Making room in your heart, making room in your house, making room in your pocketbook, making room so that everyone knows that they are loved and they can look within themselves and know God because you have reflected the light of Christ to them. May it be so, and amen.